All right, in your second assignment, it's going to be a color study, and it's 20% of your semester grade. Before you do this, you need to make sure you have either been present for or watched the color lecture that has been assigned, so that you really understand how color works and you understand the basics of color schemes. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and get started on this. So you can see that this assignment is designated, it's to help you understand color, and it's going to help you identify and apply multiple different color schemes to a single layout, not multiple, single layout, so that you can see how color affects the work differently. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to find one of your refined studies from the Project One design book, and you're going to explore that. And so explore that one study with color in different ways. Now, whenever I say to use one of your refined studies, make sure that you are using one of the modified studies for either point, line, plane, or an icon composition, or you can also use letter form. However, you don't want to use anything with a pattern, okay? So don't use the pattern stuff. The pattern stuff is going to be too busy. Also, make sure that if you are using something that is well, when you do use something that is from one of the modified, um, scaled and rotated and, overlapping shaped uh, comps, make sure that you pick something that's not too busy, because the busier it is, the much harder it is going to be for you to apply the color. Trust me on this one, I promise. Okay, so it can be from either phase 3 or 4, and you can only use line art, so nothing with photography. All right, that's the other restriction. You can't use anything with photography. And I'll show you some examples so you can get an idea of what it is that's expected of you. So you're going to create a new file with 14 artboards at 7 by 7, allowing several inches in between each artboard. And you'll copy all the objects from the original comp into the Illustrator file. And then you're going to use edit and then paste in place, okay? That command to get the artwork into the first artboard. And you can then group all of your objects in this comp and apply a live paint bucket color to it, and select this group and then choose edit, paste in place on all artboards command. So let me show you a quick example of what I'm talking about. And this is just so that you can do your explorations, okay? All right, so if I go into Illustrator and I go to, as I'm going to make a new document, I'm going to do 7 by 7 inches. And then if you go to here to more settings, we're going to do 14 different artboards. And then instead of the spacing being like a little more than 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to instead, let's do 3 columns. And let's do something, actually we can do even 2 columns, and let's do something like 3 inches apart. I like to do it a little bit so that it's further apart, and anyway, you can make this in CMYK color mode or in RGB. Either one, I don't really care. If you're doing it for print, CMYK is the thing that ultimately you're probably going to end up using in most printers. But if you stick to RGB, then some of your color options might be a little bit easier to understand as you're using the color picker to do stuff. But and then it'll tell you that it's different than the color space that's defined. And so if you choose RGB. So really, I don't really care which one of these you choose, but either one of these is fine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say create document. And so I get my artboards here. Now, the thing is, like, let's say that I want to go and I want to take this as the comp that I want to use. It's nice and simple. It'd be good. It's got good balance, good composition, and it would work really well in showing different kind of color schemes. So to do that, I can go into my layers panel, and I could either select the entire clipping group. You can see here it's the whole clipping group, and right here where it's highlighted with the double circle, that means that the whole thing is selected. But if you don't have yours arranged in clipping groups like this, then what you can also do is you can select these individually. You can either select them here in isolation mode, or you can drop this down and select out here and say hold down the Shift key and keep clicking all of the different pieces that you want from that composition. That's another option that you can do too when you're trying to select things. Anyway, and then I'm going to copy that into my clipboard. So I'll go here to copy, and then I'm going to jump back over here. And then if you come to this artboard, the other thing that you would probably want to do is label these like artboard 1, artboard 2, and so on. It's kind of up to you if you want to do that. But you can come over here then and choose this artboard and then go over here to edit, and then you want to do paste in place, right? So that's the one thing that you can do now, and then you can copy that, and you could do a so that you paste it in all artboards, and then go here, edit, and then paste on all artboards, and then you do it that way. Now, if you do it this way first, I'm going to hit undo. Then the thing is that they're not already grouped for using the live paint tool. So one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to come over to this artboard, and I'm going to do paste in place over here too. So let's do paste in place, and then I've got this one. And you'll notice that I've got a bunch of paths. You see how confusing this is going to be, right? So I'm going to undo that. And the other thing that I want to show you now is if I take all of what's here and then I put them into a group, so I can go object and then group like that, you see that it automatically puts everything in a group. And if I turn this off, it looks like some of these things didn't make it into my group for some reason. So I'm going to undo that. I'm showing you this so that you can see like how important it is to make sure that you get everything. All right, so let's do that again. We're going to select all of these objects, and now you see that all of them have the double circle over here selected. That's how you can make sure that everything is selected. Now if I go over here to object group, then I've got a group here. And so what you can do is I'm going to leave this original layer, and I'm going to just call this original, and then I'm going to put no live paint, no LP, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this and drag it down, and I'm going to put a lock on this. All right, so we'll lock that, and I'm going to turn the visibility off, okay, so that it's not available for me to make modifications to. And then on this new one, I'm gonna call this AB1 for artboard 1, and then what I'll do is I can make this into a live paint group. Now the reason I'm doing this original no LP is because there might be something about this that maybe I want to change, but once you put it into live paint and you start applying color and stuff, you can't really undo that very easily, and so it can be kind of difficult. So for instance, like if you have strokes around these and you decide later that you didn't like the stroke and you don't like what's happening with the live color, then as part of that exploration, you can go back to your original group here, and then you can make a copy of that and then go back into live paint. So anyway, now that I've got this AB1 group, all right, you see here that I've got this group selected, and it shows me my double circle over here, so I know that the whole group is selected. What I can do is come over here in my panel, and I'm going to click here where it says shape builder, but I want to go underneath that and say live paint bucket. All right, and then I can start adding color to this. Now the thing about adding color at this point is, and see I can scroll through, but I'm just scrolling through a bunch of different color. Now if you wanted to be able to make a specific selection so that you could use live paint, then you're going to need to work with your either your color guide, or over here you're going to need to have this, or you're going to go, what you really are going to want to do is get your swatches to come up. So if you go to Window Swatches, you can pull your swatches up here, and you can see what swatches you've got available. And so that's another thing that you can do too. All right, and so you're going to pick from different color schemes. And right now we don't have any specific swatches that we've created. And so if you want to figure out different color schemes, there's some different tools that you can use. And one of the things that I am going to recommend that you check out is this website called Peloton.com. It's Peletton.com. And it's a really cool free tool that allows you to do some investigation for different color schemes. And what's really cool is all right, so it starts off in monochromatic. It tells you it's a one color monochromatic. This will also help you kind of learn a little bit as well. And so you can adjust and play around with monochrome colors. You can see kind of, all right, which ones you like. And you see what it's doing is it goes and it finds the pure hue, and then it adds tints. Remember, tints are adding white, and then also shades. And it shows you some different ranges. Now, if you want to get outside of this specific range that's right here, that's automatically selected, you can also go ahead and move that centerpiece, right? And it'll find a different starting color, and it says right here base RGB, and this is one of the reasons that it's useful, I think, to set your file up in RGB, is because if you use Peloton, a lot of the stuff is going to be set up in RGB. And so you can see that this is the base, and if you wanted to change the base color, and you already know that you have a base color you want to start with, you can just paste it right there. And that's, remember, that's the hexadecimal number. So and then if you decide you want to look at something different, for instance, you can click on the triad, and you can see, okay, well, this, or excuse me, this is analogous. This is going to be triad right here. See where it's sort of triangulated on the color wheel? This is the analogous, and so you can move these around and, you know, see how far. If you move this whole thing in the center, then it will move, and it'll show you where where in the range it's going to fall on the color wheel. And so this is analogous. You can explore with these colors. Again, you can pull this in if you want to mute the color. If you want to get it closer to the pure hues, you can move it all the way to the outside up here. So there's some different options that you have, and you can move this around, and you'll start to see that some of these, like right around here, because of where we have this on the inside, you'll start to see like this value where I'm moving my cursor right here and right here, right here and right here. Those values are sort of, depending on where they fall here, they're hard to see, right? And so if you wanted to give it a little bit more contrast, you could pull it in towards the center so that your shades and your tints have a little bit more contrast. Anyway, and you can pull these in. And then it tells you also that if you want to hold down the shift key, as you're dragging something, you can make some sort of adjustments as well. So, and then you see here it says hold shift down to move shades individually. If you do that, it's really going to monkey with the arrangement, but you can explore that. And you can always start over by hitting the refresh key, but you will lose whatever changes you've made. So this is a triad where things are triangulated, and then you can adjust this so you can see how far out it gets triangulated, right? And then if you go far enough, it starts to become analogous, right? So you need to sort of pay attention. Then whenever it comes up to about right there, okay, once it gets past there, you'll notice up here, right now it's still triad, but watch whenever up here, watch what happens when I pull it back in. You get past a certain place on the color wheel, and then it turns to adjacent color, which is also referred to as analogous, okay? All right, so anyway, you get the idea. And then this would be the tetrad, which is 4 colors. And remember, I told you that this is basically 2 sets of complements. So this is the complement to this. This one's the complement to this, right? And you can start to adjust these as you wish. And again, you can pull this inside, down, out, make it brighter, in to make it more muted, and so on. Okay, and you can work around and fool around with these palettes. And let's say that you like a palette, you can go over here where it says share palette. And what I would recommend doing is, if you really like this palette, go ahead and copy this palette link and just paste it into like a text file or something, so that you have the palette ID, or better yet, just take this entire URL up here and copy the entire URL and paste it into some sort of text file, so that you can see, and like you would call this tetrad, and then put the link next to it or whatever, so that you have reference to it and you can always jump back to it. Because once you change it in Peloton, like once you come over here back to the original, if you change this and then you close this little share link, you can't get it back unless you adjust it properly. So that is one thing to be aware of. The other thing that you can do too is I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You can look at some different examples of how it would look like, say, on a web page, like a white page, a dark page. These are just sort of general ideas. It's not really, you know. Anyway, you can also look at positive design, negative design. You can look at artwork, which is kind of cool, because this is sort of more like what you're going to be working with, and it can help you kind of see how these colors would look together, you know, in different kinds of artworks, and that helps you get some idea, you know, really if these are the colors that you are going to want to explore. And anyway, and so I'm going to close that out. The other thing that you can do is where it says tables export. This is really nice because you can just come here and you can export this whole thing as HTML so that you have your original HTML page, and it'll save it to your computer. You can click on color swatches, which is really good, and then you can save this as like a picture file, or you can save it, you know, as like a Photoshop palette, if you wanted to use Photoshop, but this is not for Illustrator, right? But you can save it as a sketch palette. Sketch is a different application file. It doesn't have it for Illustrator. But you can also click here and you can find out all the information about that particular color. And you can copy the hexadecimal numbers and so on. So, you know, I would recommend you just save the entire swatch as a PNG file. And then I would also suggest that you save it as HTML. And from here, what you can do is you can literally click on the hexadecimal number, right, and you can copy that, and you can go in and paste that into Illustrator. For instance, like if I want to make that, let's go back into Illustrator, and I can go to my color picker right here, so I double click that, and I can paste it right here in this hexadecimal space, all right, and then just when I hit OK, and that changes it to that color. And then what I can do is I can create a new swatch. And so what I'll do right now is right here where it says new swatch, if I click on that, actually I'm also going to change it from list view to grid view, okay, so that we can get back into our colored swatches here. And I'm going to create a new swatch right here. And you could leave the you could leave the swatch name as R226, G10, and B64, which is the red, green, and blue value setup. And so that's fine if you want to do that. Since I'm not using it as process color, I'm doing it as RGB, then what I want to do is I'm just going to put the hexadecimal number, and then I'll put red or something like that, or like a it's sort of like a pinky red, but I'll put some sort of reddish color. All right, and then I go ahead and I create that swatch, and then if I come over here, you'll see that what it did is it added this swatch right here for me, okay? And and if I go ahead and I do that for my other colors, this is, let's go back to the Peloton, right? I can take this, I can copy that, and then I can jump back over into Illustrator. Let's do this again. We'll create a new one, and oops, sorry, I don't want to create a new swatch yet. Let me go back into the color palette and I'll paste my hexadecimal number. All right, so that's another way that I can do that. Now if I create a new swatch, I can paste that and say orange. All right, and then I've got my second swatch, and you can continue doing that. Let's jump back over, and I'll copy this blue. All right, let's jump back over here, paste that in. All right, and then I will create a new swatch again, and I'll say blue. And finally, let's do it one more time, and I'll get my green base. And this is the hue that I'm copying, by the way. Jump back over here. Right. Oops, paste that. All right, and then I'll create my new swatch, and then I will paste that hex number and say green. Okay, and what I can do is I've got these 4 swatches right now, and I can take these and I can throw them into a group, like right here. Oops, let's go ahead and highlight all 4 of these new swatches that I've got. I'll click on that. Sorry, I'm not going to drag it there. I'm going to click on that, and where it says color group 1, I'll call this tetrad. and you can call it whatever. We'll just say tetrad and do something like P2 for, project 2 or something like that, right? And then what it does is it puts it in a color group, and if I hover over this, it'll tell me that it's the tetrad for P2, which is really nice, and so I can use these 4 colors. And what's also really great is that if I select a color, now if I'm in this swatch group, all right, and I want to come over here in my live paint, I can scroll through and it's going to pick in that swatch section that I have selected. Now if I want to add more colors to that, I can. So like you could go and you could manually add all of these. That's one option. Another thing that you can also do is if you come over here to your color guide and you choose your color, in your color guide you choose those swatches. Oops, let's go back to color guide, sorry about that. It will show you right here with this little arrow that's pointing down. These are all the original swatch colors, and then on the right it shows you all the tints of those colors, and then on the left it shows you the shades of those colors. And so you're allowed to use both tints and shades of those colors in this tetrad. All right, so the other thing that you could do if you wanted is you could add to the swatch, you could add it that way. Another thing is you just come here to this color guide and you could pick from the color guide. And so if I'm over here and you see it's jumping like this, but I don't have to pick from here. I can pick from up here as well. All right, but I want to make sure that I stay within this color swatch sample. And so that's why if you wanted, you could easily come over to this color guide and you can just start dragging, like I can click here and I can drag that into this panel, like, and I can just add the swatch like really simply so that I have it available in that color group to use, and it's really easy for me to use in that color group at any time just by scrolling through it, which is kind of nice, right? And so if I wanted to add each one of these in here, I could do that, right? I'd say that I add all of these different red options. Okay, and let's do that. And then you could also come down here, and so there's some different ways that you can explore using these swatch panels, these swatch groups. All right, and here I'll go ahead and I'll add all of the tints and the shades, and I'm just showing you some different ways that you can consider building some of your swatch libraries up. Okay, let's just start from there. I'm not going to do this for every single one. Actually, I won't make you watch me. Okay, so I went ahead and I added all of those different tints and shades to this. So now if I want to select this color group, you see how if I select any of these, right, I can come over here and now I can use my arrow keys to kind of scroll through them, and you'll notice over here how it's scrolling through, right? And I could pick any of these. Oops, and now oops, it went outside of the color group. So let's just maybe start here. I can go and I can click on something to apply that color. And then I could scroll through and say, I don't like that, I want it to be that color. And it'll stay within this swatch color group as long as you just arrow through properly. Now, let's say that we want to come over, let's say we want this to be, oops, it started over. Let's say we want to go back into the orange panel, and then we can click here. And then you'll notice that it's not coloring the stroke area. So the stroke area is what you have to do separately. So if you want that stroke to be the same color, then what you're going to need to do is kind of come in here and, oops, you'll need to double click inside of it. And this is where it starts to become problematic if you didn't want that stroke to be applied. This is where I was saying before, sometimes it's easier with this. If you want to take the strokes off in the original, you can. And that's why it's kind of maybe helpful to watch some of this first. And then also if you wanted to color this background color, the thing that you're going to run into is that the background color is not part of the clipping group. So you could just draw a square, to color the background and send it to the back, and it would not be part of the group, or you could add it to the group, whichever. But like, let's say that you wanted to draw a square that goes in the background, right? Right now it's going to go in the foreground. Let's see. All right, and then let's take this stroke off of it. All right, and then you'll notice that here it's right here, this rectangle. If you wanted it to go inside of this group, you could put it at the very bottom, and it goes back behind everything. And now it's inside the clipping group. And so you can see how that works, right? So you can start to monkey around with this a little bit, and then you'll notice that everything that didn't have a fill color now looks orange behind it, right? And so you can just change all the fill colors. So there's some different ways that you can adjust this, and you might want to select one of these. You can go in with the black arrow tool, and if you double click inside, right, you can select the individual objects that are in there, and then this will give you access to the stroke if you want to give it a stroke color. And so here's where you could go over here and say, all right, I want to choose like this green, for instance. I don't know if that's the right color that you would actually want to choose, or maybe this pale green or something like that. And then you can click off of it and see if that's going to work, and it really kind of it vibrates a whole lot. But you could start to explore some different options if you wanted that way by selecting it so that you get the fill and foreground in the broken down part of the live paint group. So maybe it would be like a lighter blue color would be okay. I don't know. White seems to do kind of nicely. And then you could go back through with your live paint tool and you could start to fill different things as necessary. And so like maybe let's go back into the orange range. You know, maybe you'd want to do something like this, and then maybe go into the blue range, right? However you want to do this, you can sort of monkey around with this and figure out what makes the most sense. And let's go back maybe to like maybe a darker blue or something like that. All right. So anyway, so you get the idea, and you can start to play around with what you think are different and good color combinations. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that I'm going to double click and get outside of isolation mode. See, I'm in isolation mode, or I can just click on this arrow to take me back into the normal mode. And you'll see that this now is got a blue outline where everything else has white. I think I probably would have liked it with white better. But the other thing that I wanted to point out to you is that now I've got this whole layer, and if I wanted to, you know, duplicate this layer and move it over to a new artboard, then it's going to bring all of that color information with it. And so that's one of the reasons why it's kind of nice to keep an original. So let's turn that off and turn this on. Let's lock that. I'm going to do over here, I'm going to just select the entire thing, and I'm going to copy it into my clipboard. So we'll do copy. And then what you could do is, let's just come over here for a moment. Let's make a new layer. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'll call this AB2, like that. And while that one is selected, I will come over to this second artboard, and actually, let's real quick, let's make sure that yeah, this is artboard number 2. Okay, so I'm going to go to artboard number 2, and I will do edit, paste in place, like that. And before I go any further, while the whole group is selected, I'm actually going to go over here, and I'm going to do a live paint bucket so that it turns it into live paint, and I'm going to click it. All right, and basically what that did was it made it a live paint group. And I'll go ahead and I'll make that object black. So I'll just select that and make it black again. Let's go and choose black as my option. I'll click it. And so now what I've got is I've got my live paint group. And if I duplicate this layer, it says AB2, if I just duplicate that whole layer, it will automatically duplicate that for me, and then I could move that layer down, you know, into here if I wanted. I could just do it manually. That's one option. The other option that would be better is, here I'm going to undo all of that, is I can take this AB2 now, and I can say edit, and then I can say paste on all artboards. All right, and so now it's on all of the artboards, and where I've got all these groups, and I can just manually drag them into new layers, and then that's fine, and just rename them as AB2, AB3, and so on. Okay? But what's nice about doing it that way is that now you've already got, you know, this live paint group selected. It's really up to you how you want to do it. It's okay either way. Just don't get confused. And the other thing that you'll notice is that Like I don't want this to be there, right? I'm going to get rid of that. And now if I turn that back on, it's there. Okay. All right. So that's what you're going to do. And then whenever you finally have gotten, you know, all 14 of these, you're going to find the 5 best ones, and they all have to be different from each other. So like you can't use 2 monochromatic or 2 tetrads or whatever. You're going to take that and you're going to put that into your template that I've provided for you. And to see a copy of that template, this is it right here. So let's just collapse these things. So what you've been given here is something that says, you know, color study, and then you would put the study name. So for instance, you would come over here and you'll notice that it's like organized in a layer, right? And you would say, you know, whatever, like tetrad, for instance, if that's the name. So tetrad, like this, and then you would come over. Let's grab this particular one that we just made. I'm going to unlock this layer for artboard 1. I'm going to select, here, let's make sure that, yeah, we've got this whole group. I'm going to select the entire group like this. Okay, I can just grab the whole group, and then I can hit copy. So I'm going to do Command C or Control C. You can also do edit copy like this. And then I'm going to come over here, and you can do this a number of different ways. You can either just go here where it says rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. You can see which rectangle is which. These are just placeholders, just so you have an understanding that these are literally just placeholders. So what I'm going to do instead is I'll just keep my original layer, and I'll just call this original. All right, and then I'm going to create a new layer, and then it'll be on top of the original layer. I'll just lock the original for right now, and I'll just call this tetrad, so that I know that it's going to go with tetrad. And I'm just going to paste my clipboard here, and then I can come over and I can just align this, and I can scale it, right, so that it fits within the right amount of space. And if you want to, yeah, and then if it doesn't perfectly fit there, then the other thing too, like if it's got like a line, the other thing I was going to recommend that you also do is that you can stroke around it. And one of the easy ways of doing that would be if you wanted to come in. I'm going to unlock the original layer, and I think that it's this bottom rectangle. If I turn all these other ones off, you'll see that it is the bottom rectangle, right? So this rectangle right here, if I select that rectangle, I can either leave that or I can just move it. I'm going to copy it actually. I'll do a copy, and I'm going to come back into tetrad and I'm going to do object paste in place. Oops, sorry, edit paste in place. All right, and then what I can do is I can just give it a stroke so that it ends up, oops, sorry, let's do that, so that it ends up being the stroke. And then for this rectangle, I want to put it on top, right? And so, and then for the fill color, oops, that's what I meant to do. Yeah, there we go. And so there's that stroke, all right? And so that I've got a stroke on top. And so you can do that, and that'll work just fine. And then if you want to leave the stroke, the standard stroke thickness, you can. If you want to make it a little bit smaller, let's see, it's probably at 1 point. Yeah, so if you want it to be like 0.5 or something, you can do that. You have to actually select it. Let's go ahead and make sure it's just the rectangle that's selected. And then you can see that it's a little bit thinner. It's not as thick, right? You can also change the color of it if you want it to be not pure black. But anyway, so that's what you'll do is you'll come in, you'll take your best ones, and you'll make sure that you don't have like 2 tetrads, for instance. You would have maybe like a tetrad, analogous, monochrome, you know, have another one that's, you could also do monochrome grayscale if you want. So that's another option. You can do monochrome with one color, but you can do monochrome grayscale where you use no color. It's just all black and white. All right, so these are some of your options, and then you're going to choose the very best one that you think is like a really good representation, and you'll make it the bigger one. Okay? All right, and so this study template, by the way, is going to be found, if we come back to our assignment, right, it's going to be found right here. And this is our Project 2 color study assignment. It says template file. You can download that template file right here. All right, and you can also do like, you know, analogous 3-color, CMYK, etc. Most of you guys are probably going to want to stick with these, all right, with these 5. Analogous can be 3 or 4-color. You can also, as I mentioned, for monochromatic, you can do monochromatic with 1 color, and then you can also do a version that's pure grayscale. Okay, now I'm going to show you some examples really quick. Let's jump over here so you can get an idea. All right, this is not a study that you're going to be doing. This is just to show you like some examples. So don't look at this template and think that this is a template you need to use. But anyway, so like you can see how some of these explorations are in grayscale, right? And then maybe the same ones here, very similar ones are using just tints, shades. So you can play around with this and see, you know, like what happens if you only just use tints in your monochrome and you only use shades in your monochrome. Okay, remember tints are adding white, shades are adding black. All right, 2-color, right? And so this is you can do complementary if with 2-color. That's one that automatically is just a 2-color thing. Analogous, you can do a 2-color analogous if you want. All right, I did say 3-color or 4-color, so but you can do some experimentation to see how that works and how they look different. 3-color, you can do warm, cool, triadic color scheme. All right, and that's the other thing too, is if you, let's say that you do analogous, you can do 2 analogous, one that's warm and one that is cool, right? And so these give you some ideas of how different things can look really different depending on the color scheme that you're choosing, right? And so let's just jump back over here and let's look at some finished pieces. Like this is an example, and you can see how really differently these all sort of appear to be based on the color schemes that they're using. All right, and then another example. And this person chose not to put, you know, a stroke around it, so you don't have to have a stroke around it. You can get rid of those those black rectangles if you want. All right, and here we've got something that was used with a line comp. You can, again, you can see how different these are. Okay, it's another one that's really nice, actually, using an icon. Okay, and you can start to see how like some are the same color, but with the overlapping shapes and the way that others are applied, it starts to become really interesting. Okay, all right, so those are some examples, and that's what you're going to be doing. And the final piece that you're going to turn in is you're going to export this out to PDF to turn it in here on this discussion. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.